most people hear the word accolade, they think of success. Perhaps it is recognition for a job well done, an important academic achievement, or groundbreaking scientific discovery, or a lifetime of professional accomplishments. Today, an accolade is normally something to celebrate, but in American military history, that word can carry a far more solemn and sometimes heartbreaking meaning. During the First and Second World Wars, beautifully designed certificates known as military accolades were presented to honor American service members. Some recognized those who had been wounded in battle, while others were sent to grieving families after their loved ones had died in the service of the United States. These were not ordinary awards. They were a nation's final salute. Welcome back to Gung-Ho Military, where every artifact has a story. On this channel, we examine the military artifacts, the documents, and personal possessions that connect us to the men and women who served. Today, we are exploring the meaning and history behind two remarkable forms of American military remembrance: the World War I Columbia Accolade and the Presidential Memorial Accolades associated with Presidents Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry S. Truman during and after World War II. The word accolade is usually associated with praise, recognition, or distinction. It may describe an award presented to an accomplished employee, scholar, scientist, artist, or public figure. But the word also has much older ceremonial associations. Historically, an accolade could refer to the act or formally bestowing knighthood, often represented by touching a sword to the shoulder of the person being honored. That imagery helps explain the design and meaning of one of the most visually striking American military certificates during World War I. Its formal title was "Columbia Gives to Her Son the Accolade of the New Chivalry of Humanity." Even the title tells us that this was intended to represent something greater than a simple certificate. It portrayed military service as a form of modern chivalry, an act of courage, duty, sacrifice, performance in defense of humanity. At the center of the Columbia Accolade is the symbolic figure of America. Before Uncle Sam became the nation's most familiar personification, the United States was frequently represented by a classical female figure known as Columbia. In the artwork, Columbia stands before a kneeling American soldier. She holds a sword to his shoulder in a scene resembling the ancient ceremony of knighthood. Behind her are patriotic symbols associated with the United States, while the soldier kneeling in uniform before the figure representing his country. The image is both heroic and solemn. It suggests that the soldier has entered a new order of chivalry, not through wealth, title, or social position, but through military service and personal sacrifice. Personalized information was also added to surviving examples, identifying the service member being honored and describing the nature of that person's service. Some versions recognize soldiers who had served honorably and were wounded in action. Other examples commemorated service members who died during the war. The result was a deeply personal memorial that families could preserve, frame, and display in their homes. Today, these certificates are often encountered without the complete story of the person named upon them. They may appear in antique stores, military collections, estate sales, or family archives, but every name printed or handwritten upon one represents a real individual whose life was changed or ended by war. At first glance, the Columbia Accolade can appear to be simply an impressive piece of patriotic artwork. Its elaborate border, dramatic imagery, and symbolic language reflect the artistic style of the First World War era, but its importance goes far beyond decoration. For a wounded soldier, it acknowledged that his injuries had been suffered while serving the nation. For the family of a fallen service member, it became a permanent reminder that their loved one's sacrifice had been recognized by the country. These certificates also served another important purpose. They placed the individual soldier within the larger national memory of the war. The service member was no longer remembered only as one person within a massive army. His name, service, and sacrifice were preserved in a document that could be passed from one generation to the next. A generation later, the United States again found itself involved in a global conflict. During World War II, millions of Americans entered military service. Hundreds of thousands would never return home. For many families, the arrival of an official government document confirmed that their son, husband, father, or brother had died while serving his country. Presidential memorial accolades were issued to the next of kin of deceased military personnel. These documents commonly carried the printed or reproduced signature of the sitting president. During World War II, many bore the name of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Following Roosevelt's death in April 1945, similar memorial documents were associated with President Harry S. Truman. The wording was dignified, formal, and carefully chosen. Rather than describing death only as a personal tragedy, the presidential accolade placed the fallen service member within what it called an unbroken line of patriots. It emphasized that freedom continued to live because individuals had been willing to defend it, even at the cost of their own lives. Imagine receiving one of these documents. For the government, it was an official expression of national gratitude. But for the family, however, it represented something intensely personal. The name printed on the certificate was not merely that of a soldier, sailor, marine, or airman. It belonged to someone who had once sat at the family dinner table, someone who had written letters home, someone whose photograph may have rested on a mantle while the family waited and hoped for his safe return. The accolade could not replace the person who had been lost. It could not remove the family's grief, but it told them that the nation recognized the meaning of that loss. It acknowledged that their loved one had become part of a much larger story, the defense of the United States and the preservation of freedom. This particular accolade was presented to the next of kin of Private Bernard Joseph Luking. Luking was a member of Company B, 1st Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. He was killed in action on September the 25th, 1942 on Guadalcanal in the British Solomon Islands. This particular piece hangs on my wall as a solemn reminder that freedom is not free. That is what separates these historic military accolades from the type of recognition we commonly associate with the word today. They were not trophies celebrating a promotion, a discovery, or a personal victory. They were not presented at festive ceremonies followed by applause. Many were delivered into homes filled with mourning. They represented wounds that would be carried for a lifetime and lives that had ended far too soon. They were tangible expressions of gratitude from a nation to its service members and their families. In that sense, the word accolade returned to its original ceremonial roots. The country was symbolically placing a sword upon the shoulder of the individual and saying, "Your courage has been witnessed. Your service has been recognized. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." More than a century has passed since the end of World War I, and the generation that fought in World War II is quickly disappearing from living memory. That makes the preservation of these documents more important than ever. A military accolade may be made only of paper, ink, and artistic imagery, but it can provide a direct connection to a particular person, family, military unit, and moment in history. When we preserve these certificates, we are doing more than collecting military memorabilia. We are preserving names, we are preserving stories, and we are preserving the memory of individuals whose service helped shape the world in which we live today. Collectors and historians should always look beyond the object itself. Research the name. Look for military service records, unit histories, casualty reports, newspaper articles, and family information. Whenever possible, reunite the document with the story of the person it was created to honor. Because without that story, it is only an artifact. With the story, it becomes a memorial. The World War I Columbia Accolade and the Presidential Memorial Accolades of Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry S. Truman represent different eras, but they carry a similar message. They honor service, they recognize courage, they acknowledge sacrifice, and they remind us that freedom enjoyed by one generation was often secured through the suffering of another. These were not trophies celebrating victory. They were a nation's final salute and a solemn promise that service, courage, and sacrifice would never be forgotten. Have you ever encountered one of these historic military accolades in a collection, an antique store, estate sale, or possibly a family archive? Do you have one connected to a member of your own family? Share your story in the comments below. I would welcome to hear from you and hear of your family's service and sacrifice. And also, to ensure you never miss a thing, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more military history, veteran stories, and remarkable artifacts. I'm Brandon with Gung-Ho Military, where every artifact has a story. So join me for future videos, and until then, catch you later.